What if the United Nations simply vanished? Not in a dramatic explosion, but with a quiet systemic shutdown. Imagine waking up one morning to news. The institution, a cornerstone of global order for nearly 80 years, has been dissolved overnight. The iconic blue flag is lowered for the last time. United Nations Headquarters, New York. United Nations Headquarters, Geneva. United Nations Headquarters, Vienna. Instead, a fundamental systems engineering question. What happens when a central node in global governance is surgically removed? The consequences aren't immediate cinematic chaos, but gradual, cascading failures across unseen systems. We'll sidestep easy narratives of immediate conflict and examine the less visible, more profound impacts. Our analysis will trace ripple effects through the practical machinery of international cooperation. How would global health surveillance adapt? How would the World Health Organization respond? What would happen to millions of refugees? How would UNHCR-supported aid be affected? How would international aviation law function without a central arbiter? How would maritime law function? We'll investigate breakdowns and potential reconfiguration of these critical systems, focusing on practical, real-world consequences. And the monitoring of nuclear materials. They also anchor corporations. They enable civil society. By dismantling that structure, we can see the invisible architecture that supports our interconnected reality, and ask what, if anything, could take its place. First, we'll establish a baseline of the UN's functions and dependencies. Then we'll map initial consequences across the first hours, weeks, and months. Next, we'll assess system-wide impacts on the global economy, environmental governance, and human society. Finally, we'll consider long-term outcomes, how the world might adapt, and what new orders could emerge from the void. Section 2. The alphabet soup of survival. Section 3. The price of peace and paperwork. Section 4. The limits of an imperfect system. To understand a world without the United Nations, we must first map its current architecture. Security Council, the UN's most powerful body, charged with maintaining international peace and security. 5 permanent veto-wielding states: China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, United States. Resolutions can authorize peacekeeping missions. Resolutions can impose sanctions. Resolutions can approve military action. Next, General Assembly, a unique platform for global dialogue. Third pillar, ECOSOC. Focus areas: sustainable development, health, education, human rights. Finally, the Secretariat, led by the Secretary General, the administrative backbone and international civil service, administering peacekeeping operations, mediating international disputes. Without this administrative engine, the entire system of global governance would lose its ability to execute its directives. Beyond its core political bodies, the UN's true operational reach lies in its sprawling network of specialized agencies, funds, and programs. Perhaps the most well-known is the World Health Organization, the directing and coordinating authority on international health. It monitors influenza strains for the annual flu vaccine, coordinates responses to pandemics like COVID-19, and leads global campaigns to eradicate diseases such as polio. Equally critical is the work of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. It operates refugee camps, provides shelter, food, water, and medical care, and helps with legal protection and resettlement. Its disappearance would instantly create a vacuum in the global system for protecting the world's most vulnerable, leaving millions without a recognized international guardian. Then there is the United Nations Children's Fund, which works in over 190 countries to protect the rights of every child. At the same time, the World Food Programme stands as the largest humanitarian organization fighting hunger worldwide, delivering food assistance in emergencies. The International Atomic Energy Agency promotes the peaceful use of nuclear energy and inhibits its use for military purposes through inspections and safeguards. The International Civil Aviation Organization sets the standards for safe and orderly international air travel. The International Telecommunication Union allocates global radio spectrum and satellite orbits. Each agency acts as a critical node, creating the rules, standards, and operational capacity that allow for a functional, interconnected world. The entire United Nations system does not run on goodwill alone. It is fueled by a complex and often contentious funding structure. Assessed contributions are mandatory payments that all member states are required to make to fund the UN's regular budget. Peacekeeping operations are one of the UN's biggest expenses, and they use their own scale of assessments. The peacekeeping budget covers massive logistics: troop reimbursement, equipment, food, fuel, medical supplies. Dissolving the UN would end these mandates and sever the financial pipeline sustaining missions on the ground. Many UN humanitarian and development activities depend on voluntary contributions. That model allows fast crisis response, but makes them vulnerable to shifting donor priorities and donor fatigue. The most glaring example is the Security Council veto, which allows any of the 5 permanent members to block any substantive resolution. From Syria to Ukraine. The UN can only be as effective as its most powerful members allow it to be. Peacekeeping missions, for instance, rely on countries to voluntarily contribute troops. Furthermore, the UN is often criticized for its sprawling bureaucracy. It can be slow, inefficient, and resistant to reform. Ultimately, the UN was designed as a system of compromise, built for a world of sovereign states. Its primary function is to facilitate communication, but rather a flawed, indispensable, and deeply embedded intermediary in the complex machinery of global relations. The dissolution of the United Nations would not begin with a bang, but with a cascade of digital and financial shutdowns. In the first 72 hours, the most immediate effect would be the freezing of its vast financial architecture. The WFP's food procurement system, which buys grain on global markets, would see its lines of credit evaporate. Simultaneously, the UN's complex communication networks would begin to falter. Secure channels connecting the New York headquarters to peacekeeping missions would go dark. Democratic Republic of Congo, Lebanon. Their UN-issued laissez-passer, the travel document that grants them passage through borders, would become worthless paper. They would effectively become stateless professionals stranded in the field, their legal protections gone. The world's stock markets and financial institutions would react with immediate, albeit controlled, panic. The VIX index, a measure of market volatility, would spike. With the central guarantor of these rules gone, risk premiums on shipping insurance, international contracts, and cross-border investments would surge. The quiet background work of the UN, once taken for granted, would suddenly have a very clear and very high price tag attached to its absence. Within the first few weeks, the initial financial shock would translate into a full-blown humanitarian freefall. The World Food Program, which feeds over 160 million people annually, would be the first to face catastrophic failure. The carefully managed rations that keep millions from starvation would be cut, then stop entirely. More likely, they would move to secure the camps, cutting off services and restricting movement. Simultaneously, the WHO's global disease surveillance system would go blind. A new, more virulent strain of influenza could emerge in one country and spread across borders for weeks before the world even became aware of its existence. In this vacuum, a chaotic and fragmented response would emerge. Large, well-funded non-governmental organizations like Doctors Without Borders and the International Rescue Committee would attempt to scale up their operations. Without the UN as a neutral coordinator, aid efforts would become inefficient, competitive, and politicized, with massive gaps in coverage. The most immediate security crisis following the UN's dissolution would be the fate of its active peacekeeping missions. The command and control chain would be severed from the Department of Peace Operations in New York to the force commander on the ground. That creates an immediate, dangerous power vacuum. In the Central African Republic, consequences would be severe. Armed groups see opportunity. The Security Council's role as a global pressure valve would vanish. The initial phase likely won't be world war, but a wave of opportunistic, localized conflicts and land grabs. The disappearance of the United Nations would not plunge the world into an immediate, singular apocalypse. Instead, it would catalyze a fundamental re-architecting of global order. These regional blocs would solidify into fortified economic and security zones. Ad hoc coalitions of the willing would replace consensus-based machinery. A global system of humanitarian triage would become the norm. Aid would flow to geopolitically significant crises, while countless other emergencies would be forgotten and fester. The dream of a single global internet would face the real prospect of splintering into incompatible splinternets. That would degrade weather model accuracy, make predicting hurricanes and typhoons harder, and directly harm public safety. The idea that individuals have rights independent of their government would be dangerously weakened. The final, lasting insight is not about the UN's successes, but about the sheer scale of the problems it was created to manage. Its absence would reveal the immense, often invisible, labor required to maintain even a semblance of global order. A world without the UN would be a world that has to reinvent the wheel, but on a dozen different competing assembly lines. They would be pragmatic and exclusive, stripped of the universalist ideals that, however imperfectly, animated the UN. The echo of the UN's empty chair would be a constant reminder of the challenge. Adaptation would occur, and new forms of order would emerge, but the world would become a smaller, more fractured, and more dangerous place. Its absence would force us to learn, the hard way, just how much we depend on that imperfect shield. What scenario should we explore next? Share your ideas below. You've been watching IfVerse, where imagination meets possibility. See you in our next reality.